While Freudianism was being implemented in the 1919 Hungarian Soviet Republic, Freud received a new disciple. Wilhelm Reich was born in 1897 to a secular Jewish family in Austria. Reich would be naturally receptive to Freud's ideas on infantile sexuality, as he was sexualized very early in his own childhood. Reich would quickly rise to the ranks of the psychoanalytic movement and would come to be seen as the greatest of the second generation of analysts and Freud's natural successor. Freud himself would refer to Reich as the best head in the International Psychoanalytic Association. In 1927, Reich would immerse himself in the works of Marx and Engels and become radicalized. Reich would first fuse the theories of Marx and Freud in his 1927 book, The Function of the Orgasm, in which Reich argued that his sexual repression was the cause of all neuroses, and therefore all social disorder. Only the sexual liberation and satisfaction of the masses would allow a utopian society free of all war and oppression. It was out of this theory of the orgasm, as the cure for all of society's ills, that Reich's original concept of sex positivity would be born. In order to create the utopian sex-positive society that he envisioned, Reich would form the sex pole movement for the purpose of preaching his revolutionary sex politics to the masses. With Freud's blessing, Reich would open 6 free psychoanalytic sex counseling centers in Vienna, as well as traveling door to door distributing sex-positive sex education material and giving impromptu public speeches about the dangers of abstinence and the importance of premarital sex. Reich believed one of the main tasks of his work was the solving of the family problem. Reich believed the nuclear family to be a disease that operated as a factory of authoritarian ideologies by suppressing the natural sexuality of children. Reich favored his idea of a kibbutz system, where children would be separated from the family and be raised in polygamous sex collectives. Reich would advise married clients to abandon their moral scruples and commit adultery or get divorced. In 1920, Reich had insisted his girlfriend at the time get an illegal abortion after impregnating her, a procedure which she would not survive. But that didn't stop him from arranging as many illegal abortions as possible for the clients of his clinics who had followed his prescription of promiscuous sex. In 1930, Reich would move to Berlin, where he would carry out his sex pole work in coordination with the German Communist Party. Reich's next major work, The Mass Psychology of Fascism, would argue that the family represented the authoritarian state in miniature, and that the repression of child sexuality by the family structure would inevitably lead to authoritarianism. Reich foresaw the need to abolish the family in order to properly sexually educate children. In his essay, The Sexual Misery of the Working Masses, he wrote, "The prevention of neuroses is inconceivable as long as there continues to be family upbringing, and with it, Oedipal conflict. The prevention of neuroses begins by excluding from the education of the child his or her own parents, who have proven themselves to be the most unqualified educators. The sexual education of the small child will be put instead into the hands of specially trained personnel who will be less biased." Reich desired the implementation of laws that would protect newborn infants from being raised by their parents, as well as legal standards requiring that every professional who will have to deal with children must show proof that he or she is sex economically healthy and that he hasn't acquired an exact knowledge of infantile and adolescent sexuality. Reich believed it was essential for children to be encouraged to masturbate and engage in sex play with other children by the age range of 4 to 6, the Oedipal stage in Freudian theory. If not, they would inevitably develop neurotic tendencies and be more susceptible to fascism. The following quotes from Reich's 1936 work, The Sexual Revolution, published in English in 1945, outline his vision for a revolutionary sex-positive sex education to prevent right-wing authoritarianism. There is a consensus of opinion, at least in circles not directly under the influence of the Church, that secrecy about sexual matters does far more harm than good. Among the infantile sexual impulses, those aiming at the observation and display of the genitals are particularly well known. Under present educational conditions, these impulses are usually repressed at a very early time. It is easy to see, then, that the repression of the impulse to observe and display the genitals leads to results which no educator could consider desirable. To object to an education accepting nakedness means to agree with the usual anti-sexual education. Before tackling the question of sex education at all, one must first take an unequivocal stand for or against sex affirmation or sex negation, for or against the ruling sexual morality. We reject, then, a sex-negating upbringing because of its dangers to health, and decide in favor of a sex-affirming upbringing. If one is not ashamed of appearing naked before a child, it will not develop sexual shyness or lasciviousness. On the other hand, it will undoubtedly wish to have its sexual curiosity satisfied. Of course, one would not object to masturbation, and would have to explain to the child the process of procreation. One might evade the child's request to watch sexual intercourse, but that would already mean a restriction of a sex-affirmative attitude. We are pulling one stone after the other from the edifice of conservative morality, that the ideal of virginity until marriage becomes as hollow as that of eternal monogamy, and with that the ideal of conventional marriage in general. For no sensible person will contend that people who have had a sex education which is serious, uncompromising, and based on science will be able to conform to the prevailing compulsive customs of morality. A child with a completely free motility and natural sexuality will spontaneously resist the influence of ascetic and authoritarian ideologies. No reactionary political ideology can offer to the children what the social revolution can offer them with regard to their sexuality. It is clear, then, that in order to produce a non-authoritarian structure in the child, its vegetative, sexual motility must be safeguarded. The new regulation of sexual life must start with a different education of the child. It is indispensable, therefore, that the teachers be re-educated. There are steadily increasing indications that progressive educators in Western Europe and in America spontaneously look for new methods in the education of children and adolescents, and often begin to develop sex-affirmative concepts. Past experience shows unequivocally that any kind of hindrance of infantile and adolescent sexuality by parents, teachers, or government authorities has to be eliminated. In the process of the social revolution, the old form of the family will inevitably disintegrate.